I woke up in a room that was not mine, on a bed that felt unfamiliar. The air was thick with silence, too thick, too oppressive. My eyes squinted at the dim light seeping through the cracks of a closed, darkened window, and my head spun for a moment as I tried to remember where I was. I sat up, carefully, afraid of falling into some memory I didn't want to relive. Around me, everything seemed foreign. The cold, white walls, the sterile smell of the place, the lack of personal belongings. Not a single photo, not a single item of comfort. The sheets felt wrong beneath me, too smooth, too stiff. I glanced down at my wrist and saw the small tattoo, a number etched into my skin like a brand. A prison tattoo, though I didn't know yet if it was my own sentence or someone else's. I was 72. I had lived through many things. I survived war, love, loss, raising children who now barely remembered to call. But nothing had prepared me for this. The walls around me were a cage, a cold reminder that my life was no longer my own. I was trapped. And somehow, it was easier to bear than the thought of what had brought me here. My son had put me here. The words still stung in my chest, as if the very air I breathed was trying to choke me. Jason. The son I raised. The son I gave everything for. And this was my reward. I'd seen it in his eyes when he told me it would be better for me. It would be easier. You don't want to be alone anymore, do you? He'd asked, and I had simply nodded. I was old, he said. I needed to be taken care of. It'll be nice, he had said. They'll look after you. But the minute the car doors slammed shut behind me, I realized how wrong I had been. He hadn't taken me to a place for care. No, he had taken me to a place to disappear. And the worst part, let him. I never asked why. I didn't question him when he said that everything would be fine. I didn't even look back as I watched the place I had called home fade in the rearview mirror. I didn't fight it. Now, sitting on the edge of the bed in this sterile, unfurnished room, I wondered how I had become so invisible. They thought I was weak. They thought I was confused, that my memory was failing, that I was slipping away quietly. But I wasn't confused, and I wasn't slipping away. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I thought about how things had gotten to this point. How I had tried so hard for so many years to make everything work, to hold everything together. But, in the end, Jason had made his choice. And now I had to make mine. The nurse who brought my breakfast this morning didn't even look me in the eye. She simply handed me the tray and left, like I was just another resident, another lost soul in this place. But I wasn't just a resident. I was a woman who had spent her life fighting. And now I was going to fight again. I wasn't going to fade away like they thought I would. I had a plan, of course. I'd always had a plan. When they dropped me off, they left me with nothing but a few clothes and a pair of slippers. They left me with a number, as if I were just another unit in a long line of forgotten women. But I wasn't just a number. I knew better than that. I knew what Jason had done. I had seen the way his eyes darted nervously when he told me how much better it would be for me here. I knew what he was after. He thought I was too old to notice. Too old to fight back. But that's where he was wrong. I wasn't about to let him steal everything I had worked for. My house, my money, my memories. He thought that by placing me in this facility, he could get away with it. But I had learned to pay attention. I had learned to notice the small details. The way he had signed papers in my name. The way he had gone behind my back to freeze my accounts. The way he had already begun to sell off my belongings, without asking for my consent. But the moment I stepped into this room, I realized something. I realized that as long as I was still breathing, I still had control. I wasn't done. Not yet. I knew I wasn't alone in this fight. The first step was simple: get out. Get out and get my things back. Every last thing. And then, once I had everything back, I would make him regret ever thinking he could do this to me. I would show him exactly what happens when you underestimate your mother. I would fight for what was mine. For the life I had built. For everything they had tried to take from me. And Jason. He wouldn't know what hit him. The following days were filled with silence and the mind-numbing monotony of routine. The quiet of this place was suffocating. The stillness that surrounded me weighed heavier than the walls themselves. I sat in the same uncomfortable chair by the window, staring out at a world that seemed so distant now. I missed the familiar smells, the everyday sounds, the scent of morning coffee brewing in the kitchen, the soft hum of the dishwasher as it worked through the night's dishes. These were the things I had taken for granted. Here, in this sterile room, there was nothing of me. The plastic flowers in the hallway looked like cheap imitations of life, the kind of thing you'd expect to find in a hotel lobby, not in a place that was meant to be called home. The lights, oh those lights, never quite bright enough to push away the shadows. It felt as though everything was trying to deceive me, these dull, lifeless colors that surrounded me. It was all so wrong. Each time I saw one of the staff members, I forced myself to look closely. They spoke in that soft, almost exaggerated tone, the kind that people use when they're trying to convince you of something to make you feel small. The questions about my health, the long pauses in conversations, those looks of pity, and the subtle yet constant insinuations that I was losing my mind. It all felt like a game. They wanted me to believe it. They wanted me to believe I was just another old woman who had outlived her usefulness. But I wasn't. I watched, listened, and remembered everything. I had learned long ago that silence could be a weapon. I watched how they handled the papers and medical files with such care, as if they believed I wouldn't notice. But I saw it all. My accounts were being drained, small amounts at first, then larger sums. The balance on my credit cards was dipping lower and lower. The numbers were all wrong. And they thought I wouldn't notice. Oh, they were wrong. I wasn't stupid, and I wasn't slipping into senility. I knew what was happening. I had always been meticulous with my finances, and seeing the changes in my bank accounts confirmed it. I had been tricked, manipulated, and stripped of my autonomy. They had planned this. They had everything in place before they even brought me here. My son Jason and his wife. I saw through their act the moment they dropped me off. They had their lawyer ready. They had all the papers signed, forged, and ready to go. But they hadn't counted on me. They hadn't counted on the years of experience I had behind me. I knew how to read people, how to see through their lies. They might have thought they could silence me, lock me away, and make me disappear. But I wasn't done. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't just about what they were taking from me. It was about respect. It was about dignity. It was about making them realize that no matter how old I was, I still had power. Power they had underestimated. That first day, when I finally had a chance to use the phone, I dialed the number I knew by heart. It had been years since I'd spoken to Martin, but he was the only one I trusted. He had helped me before with legal matters, and I knew he was the one person who wouldn't be fooled by their tricks. "Martin," I said when he picked up. My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't expected to hear his voice again, but there it was. Strong, familiar, comforting. "Lillian, is that you? It's been a while." "I know, but I need your help," I said quickly. "I'm in a bad situation. They've taken everything from me, Martin. They've locked me in here, signed documents I didn't agree to, and now they're draining my accounts. I need your help to fix it." Martin didn't ask questions. He didn't press me for details. He simply promised to help. "I'll call you tomorrow, Lillian. We'll figure this out. I'll get the papers and we'll get everything back in order. Just hang in there." For the first time in days, I felt a tiny spark of hope. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't as helpless as they thought I was. But this was just the beginning. I couldn't wait for someone else to fix it. I had to take matters into my own hands. I knew what they were doing now. They had been moving too quickly, assuming I wouldn't be able to track what was happening. But I had lived a full life, and I knew how to gather information. I knew how to follow the trail. The devil is in the details, they say, and in this case, the details were crucial. I started small, checking the bills and accounts, the things I had ignored in the past because I trusted people to handle them. I hadn't been paying attention to my credit card statements for months, assuming they were fine. But they weren't. I dug deeper. I looked at my bank statements, found discrepancies, things that didn't add up. They had been siphoning off my funds for months, slowly and steadily. But I had access to the accounts. And that meant I had the power to fight back. I reached out to some old connections. People who had helped me over the years. I needed evidence, documentation. I needed to know exactly what they had done. I would expose everything. They thought they had trapped me, but they hadn't realized one thing. They had underestimated my ability to see through the lies. They thought I was weak, but I was ready. I was prepared to fight. Every move they made, every document they forged, every plan they put in place, I was watching. They thought I was slipping away, but in reality, I was gathering the ammunition I needed. Every word, every detail would become part of the story I was going to tell. They might have locked me in this place, but they couldn't lock away my mind. And that was the one thing they didn't understand. Each passing day, I noticed more and more details that gnawed at my peace of mind. The silence in this place had become a constant companion, its suffocating weight pressing in on me from every corner of this sterile room. The quiet, the empty hallways, the artificial scent of plastic flowers in the corridors, it all felt like a place I didn't belong. But as I sat in my room, observing the staff, studying their movements, their body language, and even their fleeting glances, I realized something. This wasn't just about old age creeping in.
Well,
This was something different. Could it be that I was just getting old? Was it my mind betraying me? Or was I simply becoming hyper-aware?
well,
It wasn't old age clouding my thoughts. It was a sharp, careful attention to every detail around me, an awareness that my survival depended on it. Every gesture, every word was something to be decoded. And the more I observed, the more I was convinced. They were all in this together. All of them. Every nurse, every orderly, every smiling face that passed through this place had a part to play in the scheme to control me. How they brought me here, how they assured me it would only be temporary, that they were taking care of me, was all part of their plan. The more I sat and thought about it, the clearer it became. The whole situation had been orchestrated. They didn't care about my well-being. They were after something much more valuable. That morning, something inside me clicked. It was time to act. Every silent, subtle move they made, every look they exchanged, could no longer be left unnoticed. I had gathered enough information to know that I couldn't wait any longer. The clock was ticking, and every moment I spent sitting idly by was another moment they could use to solidify their grip on me. I needed to fight back, but how? The first thing I did was call Martin. Martin had been my lawyer years ago. Someone I trusted to handle the legal affairs of my life when things were still manageable. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, but I knew he was the one person who could help me navigate the mess I found myself in. I dialed the number, feeling the weight of each ring that passed. I wasn't sure what I would say when he picked up, but I knew that reaching out to him was the first step. "Lillian, it's been a while." Martin's voice came through, warm and familiar. "Martin," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to sound steady. "I need your help. They've put me in here, and I don't think I can get out without your assistance. I don't know what they've done, but I'm not supposed to be here." Martin listened, his tone serious but reassuring. "I'll help, Lillian. I'll call you tomorrow and we'll go over everything. We'll get this sorted." I hung up the phone with a sense of hope I hadn't felt in days. It wasn't just his words, but the certainty in his voice that made me feel like there was still a way out of this. And so I began. Slowly, methodically, I started going through every document I could get my hands on. Every paper, every form, every bill. It was clear that they had been draining my accounts without my knowledge. Money that was mine, that I had worked my whole life for, was slipping away, bit by bit. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the control they had taken from me. I started with my mobile phone. As I suspected, they had already accessed my account. Somehow they had been tracking everything. But this time I was determined to catch them. As I went through the messages, the bills, and the alerts, I found it. The forged documents. The fake signatures. The power of attorney they had manipulated me into signing. The documents that made it look as though I was no longer capable of making decisions for myself. The plan they had set in motion, each step designed to take everything I had, was unfolding right before my eyes. But here's the thing. They had underestimated me. I knew this wasn't the first time they had pulled such tricks, and it wouldn't be the last. But it would be the last time they tried to deceive me. I wasn't going to let them win. I carefully collected all the documents I could find, anything that could prove their lies. My bank statements, credit card records, the letters from the nursing home. I even began digging through the old papers I had tucked away. Papers from the days before I had ever dreamed of being trapped in this place. Slowly, piece by piece, I pieced together the story they had tried to hide from me. The more I found, the more I realized how deep their plan went. They had thought they could break me down, that I would fade into nothing. But they were wrong. And then a thought hit me. If I just keep quiet, if I let them think I don't know what's going on, maybe I can catch them in the act. Maybe I could expose them before they finished what they had started. I needed time. Time to gather evidence. Time to organize my fight. The following days were spent quietly. I did not react to the nurses' questions about my health, nor did I give them the satisfaction of seeing me flinch when they hinted at my age. I kept my distance, feigning confusion when asked about anything related to the documents they had forged. I allowed them to think that I was slipping, that I was weak. I let them believe their plan was working. But inside I was planning my next move. I reached out to the few friends I could still trust, the people who remembered me as more than just an old woman. I reached out to former colleagues, to anyone who might remember something about my life before all of this. I created my own network, a quiet, invisible web of people who were still willing to listen. It was a long shot, but it was better than sitting idle. By now, I had realized something crucial. This process would take time. They hadn't been hasty in their schemes. Everything had been carefully planned out over months, perhaps even years, to ensure they could take everything I had worked for without anyone questioning them. But I wasn't going to just sit and wait for them to win. I needed to take matters into my own hands. So I called Martin again. This time his voice was more urgent. "Lillian, I've looked over the documents. We can fight this, but it's going to take time. We'll need to act quickly. Have you gathered everything?" "I have everything I could find," I replied. "I'm ready. Let's get started." The plan was simple. We would challenge the forged documents, expose the fraud, and gather everything I needed to prove that they had manipulated me. Martin promised to help me with the legalities. I knew, though, that this would be a long fight. It wouldn't be over quickly. But I wasn't going to lose. Not this time. I sat in my room, reviewing everything I had gathered, the papers I had found hidden under layers of deceit. They had thought they could steal from me, but what they didn't realize was that I wasn't so easily forgotten. They would regret underestimating me. A few days had passed, and with each one, I felt my steps gaining a rhythm again. The world around me, though foreign and cold, was becoming something I could navigate. Slowly, the oppressive silence began to feel less like a trap and more like a canvas, waiting for me to make my move. I had been silent for long enough, quietly observing and collecting details, piecing together the puzzle they thought I couldn't see. The subtle movements of the staff, the glances exchanged between them, these were the things that confirmed my suspicions. They had underestimated me. I knew that they thought I wasn't paying attention. They thought I was just another old woman fading away. But I wasn't fading. I was watching, I was learning, and I was waiting for the right moment. The day I had been preparing for was finally here. It came that evening with the ring of a phone call. It was Martin. His voice was calm, but there was a tension in it, a controlled urgency. He had all the information he needed. "Lillian, I've checked the documents you sent me. We can start the process. It won't be quick, but I promise you have every right to everything that's yours," he said. And that's when it hit me, the realization that I was no longer just a woman whose past was slipping away. I was a woman who had regained control. I was determined, focused, and more resolute than I had ever been before. Martin didn't sugarcoat things. He told me the truth. The fight would be long. It would take time, but we had the law on our side, and I was prepared for it. We were going to tear apart the fraudulent documents they had created, the forged signatures, and the lies they had built around me. The very next day, Martin filed the motion to cancel the forged signatures, to challenge the changes made without my consent. He also began the process of recovering my property. I wanted my home back. I wanted my financial independence back. And I wouldn't stop until I had both. But this wasn't just a legal battle. This was personal. It was about reclaiming my dignity. It was about showing them that they had no idea who they were dealing with. In the meantime, I didn't just wait. Sitting in that small, dimly lit room, I didn't allow myself to become a passive victim. I began writing letters. Letters to banks, letters to former lawyers, letters to anyone who had once been a part of my life. I had a plan, and I wasn't going to sit around waiting for it to unfold. I carefully examined every bill, every utility statement, every small transfer I had once overlooked. They thought I was just an old woman, easy to deceive. But I had seen the signs. I knew what they were doing. I began tracking every movement of my finances. I was watching them carefully. Soon it became clear. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about my home. It was about trying to break me, trying to convince me that I was no longer needed, that I was a burden, that I was weak and irrelevant. But in those moments when they thought I was slipping away, I found something within myself. A quiet strength that had been buried under years of caring for others, of giving everything to my family. They wanted me to think I was useless. They wanted me to believe I was past my prime. But they didn't know what they were dealing with. They didn't understand how much life I had left in me. They didn't understand that, in my silence, I was preparing to strike back. One night, after another quiet day of collecting information, I received a call from my son, Jason. It was unexpected. I didn't pick up the phone immediately. I just stared at it, feeling the weight of the past few weeks in my chest. When I finally answered, his voice was uncharacteristically uncertain. "Mama, are you okay? I'm really worried about you. You understand, right? We're doing this for your own good," he said. His words tumbling out in a rush. He was trying to justify what had been done. I could hear the nervousness in his tone. It was the first crack in his carefully constructed facade. For a moment I said nothing. Just listened. I heard him attempt to smooth things over, but his words were empty now. I didn't feel sorrow. I didn't feel anger. I just felt cold. Cold in a way that I hadn't known I could feel toward my own son. I didn't respond. Instead, I hung up. His voice lingered in my mind for only a moment, but the plan that was taking shape in my head, that was crystal clear. They thought I had forgotten. They thought I was too old to remember the details. But they were wrong. I remembered everything. And this time I wouldn't forget. The next step was to continue gathering evidence. I couldn't afford to miss anything. I called Martin again as promised. "It's time," I said, my voice steady. "They're going to regret underestimating me. I'm ready to move forward." With Martin on my side, the wheels were already in motion. The legal papers were being filed. The process of reclaiming what was rightfully mine had started. But this wasn't just a matter of paperwork. I knew I needed to be one step ahead. I needed to be ready when they made their next move. As I sat in that room, the world outside feeling more and more distant, I realized something crucial. They had made a grave mistake. They thought they could take everything from me without resistance. They thought they could lock me away and forget about me. But they didn't know me. They didn't know who they were messing with. I had lived a life full of struggles, a life where I had to fight for every inch. And this would be no different. I wasn't going to be their victim. I wasn't going to fade into the background and let them strip me of everything I had worked for. I would fight. And when I won, they would understand that sometimes, the people you think you can ignore are the ones you should fear the most. They didn't know who they were up against. And they were about to find out. Each day spent here felt like a battle against windmills, but I no longer feared the struggle. While they thought I was passively waiting, I was actually weaving my own web, not with papers and signatures, but with the people who still remembered me for who I had been before they decided to lock me away in this place. That morning, as the nurse brought my usual medication, I noticed her behavior had changed. She was trying too hard to look kind, her demeanor almost too cautious, as if her every move was calculated. I had grown used to her ritual, The quiet entry, the mechanical smile, the polite words that didn't reach her eyes. But this time was different. This time I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. Her fingers lingered on the edge of the small piece of paper she had been holding before handing me my pills. She fumbled slightly, as if trying to conceal it from me, but I had already noticed. The subtle motion, the hesitation, it wasn't just a mistake. She had slipped something into my hands, carefully and deliberately, knowing I would see it. I watched her walk out of the room, her back turned slightly, but I was already focused on the tiny note she had left behind. It was just a scrap of paper, but the words written on it made my pulse race. This is not the final stop. I quickly stuffed the note under my pillow, trying not to let my face betray me. My mind raced. Who was this? Was it a nurse who felt the same way I did? Someone here who wanted to help me? I couldn't be sure, but I knew one thing for certain. Someone was trying to give me a way out. After the nurse left, I sat on the edge of the bed, the quiet room closing in on me. My thoughts spun as I tried to figure out who was on my side, who could be trusted. I needed more information. I needed to know who I could turn to. But for now, all I had was that scrap of paper, and I wasn't about to let it go to waste. The next day I made my first move. I started reaching out to old friends, former colleagues, anyone who might remember me before my life had been turned upside down. Martin, my lawyer, was one of the first people I contacted. He had been a steady presence in my life before everything had gone wrong. I knew he would understand the gravity of my situation. But even Martin knew that this was going to be a difficult fight. He told me to gather all the documents I could find, any agreements that had been signed with my son, anything I could trace back to the legal mess they had created around me. I knew it was a long shot. They had been too quick in making changes, too eager to seal my fate. But I remembered how careless they had been. My son, especially, had overlooked the small details. The things he thought I wouldn't notice. How could he have thought I was so far gone that I wouldn't remember their conversations? How could he have believed I wouldn't see through his lies? But it was clear now. They weren't careful enough. And I wasn't about to let them get away with it. I began my search, quietly and methodically, through the documents I could get my hands on. I went through old letters, account statements, anything that could help me trace back to the point where they had begun their deceit. The more I looked, the more I realized how much they had concealed from me. Documents that were supposed to be signed by me, changes made to my personal information without my knowledge, all filed away under layers of paperwork. I had access to things I wasn't supposed to have access to, and now I could see how deep the web of deception ran. But the more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about money. This was about power. They had tried to take away everything that was mine, convinced that I wouldn't notice. They wanted to strip me of my dignity, to make me feel like I was a burden. But I refused to let them win. I was still capable. I was still strong. And now, more than ever, I knew how to fight back. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new message. It was a number I didn't recognize. It read, "Get ready. We're ready." I didn't hesitate. I knew exactly what it meant. The plan was moving forward. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Someone I still didn't know, was helping me. And with their help, I was going to take back what was mine. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Martin had already begun the legal process, filing motions to revoke the forged signatures and the fraudulent changes to my accounts. He had already made the first steps toward getting my property back, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. It would take time. But with each move we made, we were gaining ground. Slowly but surely I was going to win this battle. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It wasn't just about reclaiming what they had stolen from me. It was about reclaiming my life, my freedom. It was about showing them that I wasn't just a helpless, old woman. I was still me. And they had no idea who they had underestimated. The plan wasn't just about legal moves. It wasn't just about paperwork. It was about people. People who remembered me as someone strong, someone capable. I wasn't going to let them silence me. Not now. Not ever. I continued to gather information, working quietly in the background, piecing together the truth. I reached out to anyone who might still be able to help. Every connection, every ally was another step toward victory. I could feel the momentum building. But the most important part of this process was what it had done to me. I had started out in this place feeling helpless, resigned. But now, every step I took was a step closer to freedom. They had thought they could break me. They thought I was finished. But now, I was more determined than ever. The final phase was coming and I was ready. They had no idea what they were up against. They thought they had locked me away. But what they didn't know was that they had unleashed something far worse than they could have imagined. They didn't know who they had crossed. Each morning, sitting in this cramped room, I felt myself becoming more and more like a chess player, carefully studying the battlefield. Their strategy was well thought out, but I wasn't about to leave them any room to maneuver. They thought I was incapable of movement, that I was just passively watching the fake spectacle they had orchestrated for me. But that was not the case. They didn't know that I was watching every move they made, dissecting each step they took, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The day I finally got access to the old laptop was the first real push toward victory. I had always been cautious when it came to money and documents, knowing that these were the places where they would try to hurt me the most. But I wasn't just going to stand by and let them steal everything I had spent my life building with forged documents and false promises. Martin had sent me several important files via email. He had already begun gathering evidence for the lawsuit regarding the illegal signatures and fraudulent agreements. There it was, hope once again in the form of hard evidence. Now that I had the documents in my hands, I could use them as weapons in our fight. But this wasn't enough. This was just the beginning. I had to move faster, be more strategic. So, I started working quietly but relentlessly with the banks where we kept our joint accounts. I reached out to their employees, trying to get access to information that I could analyze even further. I wasn't just going to challenge the fake signatures. I was also going to expose the illegal access to my personal finances. Their impatience would be their own downfall. Then one day, I received an email from one of the bank employees with the subject, "Verification of your accounts." At first, I thought it might be another one of their attempts to cover their tracks. But when I opened the email, I saw something that stopped my breath in my throat. A list of all the transactions that should have been under my control. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was another piece of evidence of their fraud. They had made a significant number of illegal transfers from my account to their own names. While I couldn't access all the details, the email was a signal that things could finally change. I didn't just have rights to my money. I could cancel their actions and take everything back. Martin called me again. He could hear my surprise in my voice, but his was calm and confident. "Lillian, this is exactly what we needed. We're moving forward. I'm confident we can file a lawsuit to reverse these transfers and stop the forging of signatures. We will definitely get everything back that they stole from you." I silently listened to his words, and for the first time in a long while, I felt that heavy veil that had hung over my life start to lift. But this was just the beginning. Martin promised that soon he would be ready to file the lawsuit and send copies of all the forged documents to court. All I had to do was wait for my time. In that moment, I understood something crucial. This entire fight had been nothing more than a game to them, and I was playing it better than they could have ever imagined. I was ready for the big victory. A few more days, and I would once again be the master of my own life. But while I was waiting for Martin to finalize the lawsuit, I didn't sit still. Every detail, every transaction, every slip of paper, they all mattered. I began to connect the dots between the fraudulent transfers, the forged signatures, and the careful manipulation of my assets. I carefully reviewed every document, every statement, and slowly but surely, I began to see how they had been trying to paint me into a corner. It was their arrogance that had betrayed them. They thought they could play me for a fool, that I would simply fade away into the silence they had created. But they were wrong. Every small detail, every step they took to control me only brought me closer to victory. That's when I realized that I wasn't just a victim. I wasn't just someone they could lock away and forget about. I was still a force to be reckoned with, and I would use everything at my disposal to take back what was rightfully mine. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. They had more resources, more power, and more people on their side. But I had something they didn't. I had patience, determination, and the ability to wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, I would strike. Every day spent in that room was one step closer to taking everything back. I was collecting the pieces, and soon I would be holding the full picture. The game was far from over, but the end was in sight. I knew it wasn't just about the money. It wasn't even just about getting my house back. It was about showing them that I wasn't the helpless, forgotten woman they thought I was. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my identity, and my life. They had underestimated me, and now I was about to show them the consequences of making that mistake. They had no idea what they had started when they tried to push me to the side. They didn't know who they were dealing with. Each new day spent in this place felt heavier, yet at the same time it made me more resolute. They thought they had already decided everything for me. My children, their strategy. To boldly take my life, my home, my finances, and all of it at a moment when I should have been ready to surrender. They were sure that I was no longer capable of fighting back. But what they didn't know was that I was not just alive. I was alive with the same skills I had always had. And they still hadn't realized that I had something else on my shoulders. My strength and immense determination. And then came the moment. Martin called again, and this time I could hear it in his voice. The resolve I had been waiting for. He told me that he was filing the lawsuit for the return of my property and the cancellation of the forged documents. All that remained was to submit the papers to court. That very day, when I finally received the signed documents from him, we headed straight to the courthouse. I was no longer the woman they could simply forget. A few days passed, and I learned that my children were deeply surprised when they found out about the lawsuit being filed. Using their own actions against them felt almost satisfying. I couldn't help but feel that justice, slow but steady, was on its way. But the moment that truly exposed their true faces came when I received a call from my son. It was unexpected, and I knew then that he was beginning to realize his plan was falling apart. His voice was different now, heavier, as if he was struggling to keep control. "Mama, you can't do this. We were just trying to help you. This is for your own good," he said, as though he didn't even understand what he was saying. I could imagine him standing on the other end of the line, desperately trying to hold together the last pieces of his crumbling control, which was slipping right through his fingers. I didn't respond. I stayed silent because I could feel that the real moment of revenge was drawing near. They thought they were doing everything right. They didn't understand how I felt, how I had always seen through their plans, and how deeply I felt that I couldn't let them take what was mine. And then that moment came when we arrived at court. Every step Martin took, every argument he made, every statement he gave was precisely calculated. My name had become an unshakable wall that they couldn't get past. Slowly, we submitted all the forged documents they had filed. And the result didn't take long to arrive. The court ruled in my favor. My property was returned to me, the forged documents were annulled, and the lawsuit was won. They had tried to convince the court that it was all my mistake, that I simply didn't understand the situation. But the judge didn't buy their manipulations. It was my victory. They thought I would remain powerless and useless. They didn't know that their own cruelty would, in the end, lead to me getting everything back that rightfully belonged to me. When I walked out of the courthouse, I felt relief but also strength. My children could no longer manipulate me. They could no longer take what I had spent so many years building. And this was about more than just money or property. It was about dignity, about regaining control over my own life. Now I was no longer just a woman who survived. I was a woman who had won. And no one would ever take from me what I had earned.